Lawyer, and a very good friend. Brian and myself get to know each other a few years ago, and we do a lot of we do the first responder barbecue with all the police in Peel, Toronto, Cochrane, you know, Grand Prairie, Whitby, and we even took it out to Kenya this year. We had an amazing police barbecue in Kenya, first time ever in the history of Kenya. We had the churches invite the Kenyan police. 100 police officers showed up. We barbecued. They had an amazing time, and they said, why is an Canadian have to come here and show these Kenyans what to do? You know, can they not do it every day? Like not every day, but maybe every 6 months they can do this. And so we're encouraging you guys that are watching in Kenya. We're encouraging you to continue doing the police barbecue to encourage those police officers. But let's give Brian Pearl a warm welcome as he come up to share.
Got some slides up there for me. Do we have a clicker? Perfect, just a second. Let's try a button. Any button, any button. Okay, that's what I got to do. No, try that one. Try that one. Try that one. Nope. I'm gonna let you handle it. I don't know. Okay, well. That's okay. I'll let you advance it. I feel like I've been at kind of the coulda, woulda, shoulda show. I mean, there's so many things that I've heard already today that I should have done that, or I could have done that, or I would have done that if I'd have known about it, but I didn't. That is so much of my kind of story. I guess if you need a story, no matter where you are in your business a journey right now, I've sat in your seat. As I like to say, my story is how do you take a rough, tough, dirty, good-looking electrician from Fort McMurray, Alberta, to practicing Bay Street securities and corporate law, and that's exactly what it was. It was the journey of going from being somebody who's on a blue-collar salary to being an entrepreneur to going to university. I was one of those kind of kids that had to mature later on in life. I was 42 when I went to high school, so they'd actually let me into university because they would not let me into university with the kind of high school marks I had. By the way, where is she, Grace? Just to let you know, 51%, that's 1% too much work. That's how I got through high school. So. Yeah, I can guarantee you that no matter where you are in your journey, there's never such a thing as a time of being too late to pick it back up again and to start all over. I've restarted my life 3 different times. I've done 5 different businesses, 3 different careers, and so law is what I do now. You want to click it on the next slide. This is the typical legal disclaimer. Anything I tell you, you can't believe, and you can't use it ever against me. So now that we've gone past that, let's move on. And basically, here it is. Now, board games, sports. Who's played them? Who likes them? Who does them? Hands up, just a few? No? Okay. They've all got rules. How about if we played Monopoly when we used the rules from Uno? How well would that work? That's really what we're talking about. We're just talking about the rules of the game. There's a game that you're in, and it's which game are you going to play, and what are the rules to get by to do it with the least amount of risk and the most amount of reward. And so any one of these particular strategies will work. A lot of times you'll start off and you'll just do something that's a sole proprietorship. And when I went to university, it took $50, $25 that went into the bank account, and then $25 to register a business name. And Bryson Electric was born and raised, and that's how I helped fund my way through university as a sole proprietorship. Now, would I recommend that to any of you as a lawyer? Absolutely not. The reason being that if you did something wrong, and whatever it is your industry is, your business is, and something goes wrong, all of your assets, your house, your RSPs, maybe your wife's jewelry, I don't know, whatever assets you've got, they're all at risk. The reason I did it, I had nothing. I had no house, I had no assets, I had no RSPs. Sue me, we're going to get blood out of a stone? The worst that'll happen is I'll go bankrupt. But there was nothing, even in first-year law, that you could get. I had no assets. So sole proprietorship will work. Doesn't take much to do it. Partnership, well, Derek talks a little bit. Yeah, you're getting in bed with somebody else, and before you get in bed with a partner, you should know who you're getting into bed with. You've got to know who the people are that you're dealing with, and then you start to create structures around that. You start to create structures. A lot of what we talk about in incorporation and in partnerships is what happens when it doesn't work anymore? What happens when you need to get a divorce? How do we do that? It's the things that we'll talk about, they're all part of your insurance program, your risk management. Incorporation is probably the one that has the most amount of risk management involved in it, because now you're just a shareholder. I can't remember, somebody said something about you don't create anything. I hate to tell you that, but an incorporation is an entity that never dies. It always exists. But as a shareholder, you can sue the corporation, and the corporation could go bankrupt, but you can't get at my house. You can't get at my RSPs. I may be the shareholder, and I'm the owner, but I'm not the entity. Next slide. So what I've got here is a ton of slides. You've got the program. You've got my email address. Send me an email. I will send it back to you. There is way too much information on here for you to be able to grasp and absorb all at once. But it is all the various different talking points, all the different things you'll want to run your mind through as you decide, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Any road will take you to Rome, but it can be one heck of a long journey if you go the wrong way first. And so part of it is kind of figuring out what's your roadmap. Now, from a professional point of view, I take companies from startup right through till I take them when they're public. And in the conversation that I've had with many of the companies that I've started up, after we've gone through the basics, who's your officers, your directors, the people that are running the company, what's your exit strategy? When you're all done, is this something you're passing down to your kids? Is this a mom and pop shop? Is this going to be something Microsoft is going to buy? Are you going to take this thing public? How do you, when it comes time to leave, what does that look like? And if you tell me what it looks like, then I'm going to spend time at the beginning figuring out what that structure looks like when it comes to shares, how you're going to raise capital, all of those kinds of things. Because while you're just thinking about starting up, I'm thinking of where your business is 5 or 10 years from now. And I'm laying down the framework that helps you to get the most amount of traction that you can with that set of rules. Now, some point in time, you're going to change the rules. You're going to play a different game. And so then we'll accommodate that. But it starts with at least having some kind of an idea of what are the rules that I want to play with. Read the slides. I'm not going to talk a lot on it because, like I say, there's way too much information in there. But your sole proprietorship, no liability protection, tax planning, HST, you're over 30,000. You get to be able to take your losses or your profits, you incorporate that into your personal income tax. And when I started up my first business, it was absolutely great. I found out that I could deduct a part of my car and a part of my house off of my salary. And all of a sudden, from my take-home wages, I had more money. I got started in business just so that I wasn't paying so much income tax. That's what got me going. And how are you going to finance this? Are you going to finance it by bootstrapping it? Are you just doing it with revenue? Or are you going to need loans, lines of credit? All of those things start playing into what do I need to do? How should I set this up? Like I said, that business, $50 in the bank, $25 to register the name. That's what it took. Minimum expenses. Next slide. Partnership, well, this is getting a little more complex, and this is when you're now dealing with somebody else that may or may not be somebody you really want to work with a long time. Worst thing that can happen is that something happens along the way that your partner gets a divorce, or he passes away or she passes away, and now you have to deal with the spouse, and guess what? He is really not the person you wanted to start with. That's where you get into things like your partnership agreements, and you start thinking about all of these things. When it comes time to separate, when his vision now and your vision or her vision, they change, how do you separate and how do you do that amicably so you both get a win-win and the business keeps on going? That's some of the structuring that we start talking about in limited partnerships or in partnerships agreements. It also gets into how you're raising capital to fund this. Am I going to be inviting other people to participate? I deal with people that are doing property development, so they're selling limited shares or units in their partnership to help fund it. The only liability those partners have is just the risk, just their investment. Corporations, next slide. There we go. There's two. You can do it in a Canadian corporation, an Ontario corporation. The biggest major difference between the two is that for a Canadian corporation, 25% or 1/4 of your directors have to be Canadian. Ontario changed the rules. All of the directors could be in the United States or could be from another country. So the rules, they're fairly similar. Some people like the cachet of being a federal company. That's cool. An Ontario company works just as good. And for some people, it's even better because they might be, I've had a number of companies that are coming in where they've come into Canada under the startup visa program and everybody is a resident in India. And so we can now do that in Ontario. Next slide. Yep, keep going. Go on to the next one. This is where Derek was talking about, he picked up some things that I said. How many people have seen Shark Tank or ever watched a program similar to that? So I had a lady wound up coming to me, and she had incorporated their company, and she actually got $50,000 from one of the guys on Shark Tank. That was really cool. And she wanted to take that money, and so that was really cool too. And she actually came to a friend of mine who was counsel, didn't know anything about securities law, passed it on to me. And I said, well, send me her articles of incorporation. And this is a smart young lady. She had a university degree. She could read, and she could read a PowerPoint and fill out an online form. And so she incorporated her own company. And they ask you a couple of different questions, like, do you want restrictions on your business? No. Why would I want that? I don't want any restrictions on my business. No. Okay, fair enough. That's good. That question's done. Next question. Do you want restrictions on the ability to transfer shares in the company? Well, no. Why would I want that? I didn't want any restrictions on my business. I don't want any restrictions on the way I can transfer shares. Well, great. Click no on that. You just kicked yourself out of the most common exemption that we use in the securities law business to be able to actually sell those securities in the first place. So now I had a choice. I either amend her articles of incorporation or we have to go do filings with the Ontario Securities Commission. And so there was there's probably nobody in this room that's old enough to know this commercial. I might be the only one. Ooh, that's really dating myself. There was back in the days when you changed your oil every month. Fram oil filters, sold Fram oil filters, obviously, and they were $4.95. And the guy on the commercial was talking about how you can buy a Fram oil filter for $4.95 every month. But he says, I don't really care. You don't have to change your oil filter every time. You don't have to change your oil every time. Sooner or later, you'll pay me for a new engine. So I'm good. Pay me now or pay me later, but either way, you're going to pay me. And that's what happens in securities law and in corporate law, because when you do that, when you go and you actually do not take the time to get somebody else to give you some advice, because when you play the rules of the game, it's not the rules that you know that get in the way, it's the rules you don't know. And that's why you have some of your professionals. I mean, that's why you go see a dentist when you need a tooth filled. That's why you go see a doctor. That's why you see an accountant. That's why you see a lawyer, because there's the rules that you don't know that they think about all the time. So whoever you're using for legal counsel will help you, will guide you through that. And so that's the things that I talk about. You need to do name searches, your corporate structure. As I said, is this a numbered company? Is this a company you're going to keep? Are you selling it? Are you going public with it? What are you doing? We'll start talking about that kind of strategy at the very beginning. Then there's the minute books and the history. And one of the biggest things, and you can go and do this, and I encourage anybody to go onto the Industry Canada website to look at the forms for incorporating a company, and you can see all of the various different questions, and it costs you $200 and your company's incorporated, and away you go, and Bob's your uncle and I'm incorporated. Well, yeah, you are. There's only one slight little problem. Absolutely nobody owns that company. Not even you. Might be your company, you're the director, you're on all the hook for all the liability, but because nobody has done the back end work, which is the organizational documents, the issuing of shares, the passing of resolutions, when it comes time to paying yourself at the end of the year, guess what? You can't even pay yourself a dividend because you aren't a shareholder. Shareholders are the only ones that get dividends. And if you aren't a shareholder, it's not you. So there's the stuff that goes in the back. That's what your legal counsel helps you with. Next slide. This gets into talking about what is a resident Canadian director, things that you need to be. These are questions that counsel will be asking you and leading you through. Next question. Private company, public company acquisition. We talked about that. Next. This gets into how you're going to, things like people would describe your company. You're going to go and you're going to raise capital in it. And you use a PowerPoint to do that. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. Stick your hand up if you have. But that PowerPoint, believe it or not, actually has a specific definition in Ontario. Not in BC or Alberta, but in Ontario. And it's called an offering memorandum. And you actually need to file that PowerPoint with the Ontario Securities Commission, because that's when they will use it to say, if somebody says, you just deceived me the way you said your business was going to run and you took my money, I would never make a bad investment. You just didn't tell me all the truth about your business. And that is your get out of jail free card, or that's your hangman's noose. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. By the way, as I said, there's a lot of information I'm giving you here. It's talking points. Ask me for the slides if you want. You'll be able to look at the talking points, and you'll be able to think for yourself about what are the things that you want to have answered. Next slide. Shareholders agreement, it's dealing with your exit strategies, dispute resolutions, insurance. I had a client, I've got 2 clients recently that have dealt with 2 different issues, and it's just heartbreaking watching what they've gone through. One group of 4 people in a partnership, and one of the fellows came down with a brain tumor. And right then, for a while, everything worked out okay. In fact, as we've been reconnecting, and I'm doing some other work for him lately, but for a period of time, the question was, how does his wife and his child monetize all of the years of investment in that company? How would they take his contribution to what has taken and how it has built that partnership up over the years, and how would they take that money out, that value out, to be able to use it to support the wife and the child? They had no shareholders agreement, so they had no way, no pre-organized way to decide how that exit would look like. Everything worked out okay. That's one of those scenarios that I can walk away saying it worked, but please don't, that's not the way that I like to see you do that. Your shareholders agreement actually becomes your insurance policy in that particular aspect. A lot of times we talk about it as your prenuptial agreement. This is how you might get divorced because you're disagreeing, but in their case it was their insurance one. The other one is a client where they came into Canada, they started up under the Startup Visa program. We incorporated them. I said, let's do a shareholders agreement for you. It's going to cost you $2,500. Well, I don't want to spend that kind of money. And besides which, we've been doing business for years, and it's all worked out all good. And I know how to manage the relationship. And they kept on like that for 10 years. And then last year, they had the son come out into the backyard and found Dad floating in the pool. And we have spent probably up to $25,000 trying to fix it. And we still haven't got it all fixed. We just got it now to the point that they're all talking on the same page. So these things, these are startup costs that you do deal with, but they're insurance costs because the cost of fixing it is so much worse than the cost of taking the time to just put a little money into it at the very beginning. You're in the honeymoon phase, everybody's agreeing, and you're talking about how to, when we're going to disagree, what are the rules? What are the rules for how we're going to disagree? So you're developing the rules for your game. Next slide. That's just some of the things that we talk about, how you might exit. You know, can I buy the other guy out? If I sell it to somebody else, does everybody monetize themselves? Next line. Dispute resolution. How are you going to satisfy arguments? How are you going to structure your company so you share the power? When it comes to shares and structure and stuff like that, what we're really talking about at the base level is we're talking about sharing of power and control. When you sell shares in the company, you're actually selling some of your control over the company in exchange for somebody else's money. The old saying, cash is king, and he who has the cash is the king. You're going to have to deal with that. How much control do you have to transfer over to somebody to gain their money? When you go to the bank and you're looking for bank financing, how much control do you give the bank to be able to do that? When I ran my multi-level marketing business, I mean, I had to every month send them an inventory control sheet so that they knew how much of a line of credit they would backed by the inventory that I had. So there's things that you need to do that are accountable. Next slide. Insurance, somebody else is going to be coming in here and talking about insurance, but there's all sorts of officers, directors, liability, death and disability, family and contingencies. Those are all things that you should be thinking about, planning about, turning your mind to it. It comes at a cost. You have to figure out how to put that into the program. Next slide. Back one up. Oh, okay, sorry. When we talk about the structure, that's where I talk about common shares, preferred shares, all of the various different things. You tell me what your business program looks like, and then we'll start talking about what does that look like from a corporate strategy point of view. Some of you, maybe you're further along in life, you've got kids, you've got assets, you've got some things that you need to be considering. Oftentimes I might suggest that you talk to an accountant first, because is this something that we should be looking at bringing a family trust in? Is there a family trust contingency, some tax planning that we want to do ahead of the time we actually incorporate? Again, all these things, if you think about them ahead of time, they're easier to implement at the beginnings than they are fixing up later on. Okay, next slide. Employee stock option plans, and I see this all the time. This is the one thing that I want to see if I can't correct in your way of thinking, and that is that I'm just going to give somebody 10% of my company. The one thing that we don't understand when we say that is that 10% only reflects 10% at a period in time. If I have 100 shares that I'm issuing and I give somebody me 90 and him 10, he's got 10% of the company. But if I need another investor to come in and I need to issue them another 10 shares, well, suddenly those numbers change, because now there's a total of 120 shares, and 10 is no longer 10% of 120, and so you get what you call dilution. And so that's all part of that understanding of rewarding company. Think of it as in, I'm going to give you X amount of shares in the company. It might be 10%, but that 10% is reflective of the value at that time. And that's a conversation that you need to have and understand with whoever you're becoming partners in, because if you bring in other partners, you have to know that that dilution factor exists. If you're dealing with employees and you're wanting to deal with incentives, there's things like stock option plans and things that you can do to structure that. And we can even structure that so that at the end of the day, when those employees get those shares, they can do it without actually having to spend any cash. We can do it just based on value. One of the other things that we also deal with is when you give employees stock options, if you actually give them shares, those shares are taxable. That's value. They've received that as income. So now they've got a piece of paper that they got to pay 30% tax on. Well, where does that 30% cash to pay the tax on those shares come from? That's why we deal with options, because options are not, they're not shares. You can't vote them. So we structure these things so that people can gain value in the company for the work that they do as employees, but they don't have to pay tax on them immediately. Next slide. Prospectus exemptions, raising capital, it's one of the things that I deal with. There's like over 40 different ways that we have of raising capital with prospectus exemptions. The simple way of thinking about a company is that it's a balloon, and inside the balloon is value, and that value is the common shares, or however you distribute that out. Those shares cannot get out of the balloon unless you do what's known as an initial public offering, and that's like, you know, when Facebook went public, and those kind of costs come at $500,000. That's kind of what we're doing. Obviously, you'd never have a company ever come into existence if that's the way you had to do it. So we create exemptions to the rule. The rule in the game says, I need a prospectus. Well, I'm going to create an exemption to the rule, and so there's about 40 of them. And the way I describe it when I'm dealing with it in Canada is it's just like a Rubik's Cube. Every province has their own set of prospectus exemptions. And when I'm talking with you, what I'm doing is I'm going to take the rules in the province of BC and Alberta and Ontario, and I'm going to twist that Rubik's Cube around so we get the kind of red dots and blue dots and green dots and yellow dots that meet your business plan. And so that's how we twist it around. So we're still working with the rules, but we just make the rules work for ourselves. Next slide. Those are just some of the various different prospectus exemptions, the most common ones. One of the more interesting ones is we have something called friends, family, and business associates. And how many of you have always thought that your uncle and your aunt and your cousin were your relatives? Well, I hate to tell you this, but under securities law, they're not your relatives. Okay, your relatives are your sisters and your mother and your grandmother, but your cousins and your aunt and your uncle are not your relatives. And so if they want to help you with your business, you actually can be placed in a position where you can't take their money. Well, that's how we regulate the sale of securities in Canada. It's very strongly oriented towards investor protection, and how we protect our investors is we don't let them invest. And that's very paternalistic, but that's the rules. That's the way it is. And so how do we work around those rules? Well, that's where I come in. Okay, next slide. That whole PowerPoint, send me an email. I'll send it to you. And then that gives you things to sit and reflect on. Those are just talking points. I've touched base a little bit on them. Now, I hope what I haven't been is something that I experienced in my first career when I worked as a construction electrician. Because as I was telling the ladies, we had a class that was right after lunch. It was called Electrical Code. And it's dry as toast right after lunch with this teacher that had a very monotone voice. And it didn't make any difference how many hours sleep I got. I could not stay awake in that class. So I hope I didn't put you to sleep, because this is about as dry as toast, but it's the rules of the game, and really it's about deciding what does your game look like, how do you play your game the best. I've played most of these different games at one point in time and at different levels, and they all have value, they all have purpose, and they all meet where you are at your time, but just recognize that not all of them are the ones that you want to use all of the time. They might just have a limited lifespan before you say, okay, I got to take this sole proprietorship, I got to move it to the next step. So, without any further ado, I'm going to bring up somebody much more interesting than I am. Come on up.
Thank you.
Sebastian.
Joel, can I use the keyboard? Will the keyboard work from down here? Sorry, folks, just going through some technical stuff. Try it. Is it also with a sensory Bluetooth? It's Bluetooth. So which one? Oh my God! No the one that says financial on it. And which button is it just, which one's forward, back, right? If I want to go back, it's that one, right? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pastor Derek, and everyone who's here today. Who's excited to be out today? Okay. So who's excited to be out today? One more time, pretend you care. Who's excited to be out today? Amazing, amazing. 7 out of 10, that's good, guys, right? After spending 3 years stuck behind a screen and had to learn how to Zoom and all that fun jazz, you know, anxiety built. I remember I had a meeting one time where I had 50 people on Zoom, and I was like, I literally had a panic attack because I'm like, how am I going to do this? I've never done Zoom. Is it recording? Who's there? Is this even compliant? You know, all this fun questions that come into your head. And then you do it for 3 years, and by the end of it, you're like Brian said, and you're like, when are we going to go back to personal touch and humanity, right? And I'm so grateful for it because, first of all, let's give a round of applause to every single speaker so far because they were phenomenal. From Grace, Amanda, can't wait to hear what you have to say. And I'm excited that you brought up insurance and a bunch of other fun stuff that I'm probably not going to touch on as deep as you did today, right? So, yeah, lucky me, right? You know, how many of you guys experience any of this stuff, right? Who's uninterested, 9 to 5 till they're 65, working for 45 and then die? Who's interested in that? Not really, right? Nobody wants to do that, right? You know, sick of living paycheck to paycheck, tired of making ends meet. You know, when there's more month than money at the end of the month, that happens to a lot of us, right? And then, you know, convinced that there's always a better way. I lived 35 years of my life knowing that there was a better way, but fell into box number 1, right? And the only reason why I didn't jump to the other box is because I was sold the illusion that I was guaranteed something, right? You know and I know the only thing we're guaranteed is the next second of our life. No one's promised tomorrow, so you better make today exciting. Does that make sense? So, picture of me and my lovely wife. The reason why I have her here is because she's always with me, and you know, for a brief moment, you don't got to look at this. That's really it, right? But she's duly licensed with me in our business. To the right are our financial government licenses. One of them is called a license with FSRA. It is a life, disability, critical illness, health, dental, you know, business license. And the other one is a mutual fund license, which our friend Brian mentioned, the OSC, who's everybody's friend. You know, these are the guys who keep us compliant, regulated, and allow us to make the money that we make, right? But the reality is my story is what put me into this business. I enjoyed people. I was tired of 9 to 5, and I wanted to see people do well. And I was one of those entrepreneurial-hearted kids that did what all entrepreneurs do. They go to school, they come out looking for a business opportunity, and they get the next best paying job because it sold me security, which is garbage, right? Not that I'm dismissing anybody at a job. I had a job for many years, just so we're clear. I'm not dismissing jobs. I'm just saying the idea, if you're excited on a job, is absolute pollution to your head, right? So today, we've got over 500 clients. I've got 42 licensed agents that work for me part-time, full-time, sometime, anytime, 2 o'clock in the morning time, whatever time they need me, I'm there for them. And the business has become such a thing, and it's still a partnership, Brian. It's not it's its own entity with, you know, options and all this stuff. But the exciting part of it is I always wanted to be in something where I felt wanted. I can talk to lovely people and see smiles and faces and changing lives, as I mentioned to Grace earlier today. But I didn't want to do it with the construct of somebody renting me my income because that's what they told me I was worth. We're all worth more, ladies and gentlemen, than what we have been sold from the time we were 4 until we graduated at 21. If you went that far to school, I went to 21, that was considered far for me. So, I provide something called an FNA, a financial needs analysis. Who understands what an FNA is? Show of hands. Amazing. 2, 3, 4 people. That's great. I love seeing that. So, what does it mean that I do? I provide solutions to debt eliminate. Who hates debt? How many Canadians have debt? 8 out of 10 Canadians, ladies and gentlemen, have debt. Okay? The income to debt ratio is $1 earned. So if you're making 100 grand, you're spending $1.81. 181,000 is going out. Now, most of that would be in owning a home back in the time when you can get a mortgage for 2% and own a home. But today, 6-7% with this wealth transfer happening with young people, good luck. You need a plan. You need a plan to succeed, right? So I provide income protections. Well, I provide life insurance, health, dental, disability, critical illness, business insurance, travel insurance. I provide an important insurance that this gentleman here was talking about, key man insurance. Somebody drops dead and he's the key man. What do? Who takes care of that? Who's your top mechanic if the mechanic runs solely the shop through this guy and you're the general contractor that owns the shop? How does that work? How does your wife and kid not get, removed and it's like, where's my money? My husband built this over 25 years. That's very important stuff. Questions that people don't think about. And it's not your fault. We haven't been trained from elementary to high school to college to think about day-to-day financial decisions that, as Amanda said earlier, we're in two modes. We're either running to joy or running away from fear. And that's all we have neurologically. So you need someone to help you get through neurological decisions and whatnot, right? Investments, very important. How many 65-year-olds leave a $50,000, $60,000 career and go to Costco and Walmart as door greeters because they can't afford to retire? Lots. I see them. It's incredible to me. I'm like, how did you spend 40 years in corporate Canada and don't have 2 pennies to rub together? It makes me want to cry, guys, So I provide what's called a FIN number. Anybody here know what a FIN number is? You all know your SIN numbers, right? Don't tell me them. It's not important. You all know your PIN numbers on your credit cards, right? Of course you do. You wouldn't be able to access your ATM or your MasterCard. A FIN number is a financial independence number. So you know how to earn your money through a SIN, you know how to spend your money through a PIN, but at the end of the day, when you're alone at home with your debts paid, hopefully, you don't know what your FIN number is to help you financially keep you afloat until you die? What kind of Russian roulette do you want to play? Not a fun one, in my opinion, right? So it's customized, complimentary, and confidential, and I basically make it so that it works for you. So no 2 plans are the same. How money works and investments. How many of you guys know the Rule 72? Amazing. There's still the same 2-3 hands that keep going up. I love it. It's the approximate number of years that it takes your money to double. So what that means is, if 72 is the calculation form, by the way, it's called the Albert Einstein rule of compounding interest. Anybody know who Albert Einstein is? He's a famous smart guy, right? So let's say you gave that money in a GIC to TD, and we grew it at 3%. So the rule is very easy. You take 72, you divide it by 3. It's going to take 24 years for that $10,000 to double. If we have it at 6%, because now you got a financial advisor at TD because you hit the threshold of 50 grand, they know who you are. They call you, hey, you need a financial advisor? I'm your guy. So they give it to you at 6%, still making you feel that it's safe, but the way inflation is going, the cost of living, it's probably more of a trap. And by the way, no one tells you if Scotia offers that guy 50 cents more, he's going across the street. You'll be like, I don't even know who my guy is anymore. So we try to get returns that are comfortable for clients based on their understanding of what it is that they're looking to get. What sort of risk tolerance are they? What do they need it for? Is this money for when I'm 65? Or is this money to go to, Jamaica or Cuba? If it is, I'm not your ATM. So you don't come to me for Jamaica or Cuba money. Because I tell you specifically in the beginning of the meeting, if this money is to celebrate in 3 weeks, please go to CIBC. They got great ATM machines. Right? So you guys all work hard for your money. Your money doesn't eat, sleep, doesn't celebrate Christmas, doesn't celebrate Easter. You guys take breaks. Every day you sleep for 8 hours, hopefully. And you have pauses every month for a couple of days. So you can't be on your market all the time. So this money that has no feelings, doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't do any of that fun stuff, should be working, whether it's in the Asia market, the European market, the North America market, all the time, 365, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year, over and over and over. That's how you gain that compound perspective. So, just quickly, an example. of what it would be if we just put away $200 a month in savings over the next 35 years. I always tell people, when you're 25 years old, you're really the golden age of money. At 65 years old, you're in your golden age, but at 25 years old, you're the golden age of money. Why? Because you have more time in the market than I at 46 do. I still think I'm 25. Brian told me he's 33. So in our heads, we're both on that trajectory to making more money. But at 65, this is why you end up at Costco and Walmart greeting versus saying, I'm getting paid an annuity, I'm getting paid from this, I'm getting paid from my RSP. So, understanding this stuff and getting compound interest working for you, really, guys, is second nature. Income protection, very important. Just a fancy name for insurance. But let's just say, you had a toaster that paid you $2,000 a month on the 1st and the 15th. How awesome would that be if you actually had a toaster that paid you on the 1st and the 15th of every month, right? Would you insure that toaster? Of course you would. Of course you would. It brings me to another analogy. When you look at your car, we pay $200 a month for my Infinity outside. That's a hunk of metal that can be replaced like this. And it pays for the roof of my house because it brings me to my job, takes care of my wife, children, all that fun stuff. But then, God forbid, I get into an accident, I'm no longer here. Hey, you know what? That insurance will cover whatever damage I did. But that car is replaceable. I'm gone. Now my income goes away in my household. See, it baffles my mind when I sit with a family and the husband's like, well, look at my wife. She's beautiful. She doesn't need insurance. I'm like, hey, no problem, man. Hey, listen, I understand. You see those two beautiful kids? That beautiful wife can go find a sugar daddy, pardon the French, and they can raise their kids for you. Or you can do the man thing or the woman thing and take care of your family. Do the right thing so that they can focus on those children. Number two, I won't show up to your funeral because the last thing I want is your father-in-law to come up to me while your wife is crying because I have a $200 RESP that you put away for your daughter last week, but not 300 or 400 or 500 or 600 grand. Make sense? So it makes sense that you want to make sure that that toaster is protected. So really two types of insurance out there on the income protection part. One is called the cash value. The other one is called a term and invested difference. So basically what I'm saying is if you're going to cover yourself, whether it's with a business partner, any kind of liability, or for your family, or you're a sole proprietor, and you put it away in what's called the cash value, it's basically a two-in-one product. And what it says is that $360 a month, you're putting $240 of it into an insurance, and $120 is going into what is called a cash value. And that cash value over the first 2 to 7 years has zero return. Who'd sign up for this right now? Zero return, 2 to 7 years, give me your money. Zero return, garbage, right? Yeah, you don't want that. The return in it is 1 to 3%. Eventually, you save about $15,000 in that. Just enough to cover the minimum funeral expense if you pass away. That's like the Ontario price. I'm Italian. If you know what funerals cost, they're like weddings. Believe me, it's not 15 grand. And then, here's the best part. I want to use that money. They're going to charge me 5 to 8 points. So now the money that I've overpaid into my insurance, they're going to charge me 5 to 8 points. That's a pretty good plan. I love it. And then at 65, you'll have a total savings of $87,000. A lot of people don't know. They don't trust. They're ill-informed. So the second worst thing is of not having insurance is having the wrong product. Oh, by the way, at death, they keep all the cash value. A lot of the rules stipulate that stuff. Or you can do the same $350,000 and you get it for $87 a month. We'll take the rest of that money and we'll put it into savings. Remember, you're starting at 25. You have a young family, right? And we do that for 35 years. Now you got $630,000 saved. So if I pass away between ages of 25 and 60, there's $350,000. But concurrently, if I live, because I don't want anybody to die, I hate delivering death claims, but if you live, which I want to know you and your grandkids and all that fun stuff, I get to share with you the disposable income that comes into that household when you retire, which at this case would be $630,000. You know what's amazing about this? Typically at this stage, if you have someone like me keeping things enforced and strong and tight, as a financial coach, you will have money, you'll probably own your house, and your kids will have a good head on their shoulder because they're not relying on high school to talk about money. So, 5 legitimate reasons that stop people from going into business for themselves. They don't have capital. This is why a lot of you are here. How do you figure out capital stories? How do you do this fun stuff? How do you graduate to getting this money, this bond, this grant, whatever the government is offering? Well, the panel of experts are here as well. They've done a fantastic job. 2, 3, and 4 are sort of one and the same. You don't have the time. You lack the knowledge. Too much risk, right? One of these professionals here will tell you their journey of what it took them from getting from A to Z and all the processes in between. So I'm telling you that there's someone here for you for all things. Whether you want me to help you financially to have that money so that you're not relying on things, or you want to go to some of these gurus that teach you how to become a source person, how to get that money, how to get it going, right? But, you know, it comes with a bunch of whys and what ifs, fear of failure. Hey, you know, when I started this thing 11 years ago, I was scared too because I had bought into the 9 to 5 for the next 35 until I'm 65, right? So you're in control, ladies and gentlemen. You can either keep your job in the next 5 years and, you know, blink, look in a mirror, and see a couple more crow's feet, a little bit more gray hair, a little more wisdom if you want to call it that, and nothing has really changed other than your fear grew deeper, you were cemented into the ideas that you kind of grew up in and you never challenged them, and you're going, oh my God, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? I know, because I've been there. 21 turned to 35. That's when I started doing this, and now 11 years later, which will be next week, I'm grateful for it. Or you can keep your current job and you can build your business part-time. One of these people can help you do that. I do that as well. Or build a business until you can make that career change and say goodbye to your job for now or forever. I do both. I can help you manage your money, or I can help you build a business in the money managing business. We have these lovely books, How Money Works and How Money Works for Kids. I run seminars sometimes and teach moms and their children basic principles that nobody talks about. And you wonder why your kid grows up and he's like, he's so smart, he's got 6 degrees, and you know, he's incredible, but he can't, you know, balance a checkbook. What? You know? And why aren't we learning this in school? Because the school's agenda is not to make you independent thinkers. It's to propagate education, and education is a force feeding of belief systems. Make sense? So, you guys got my number, by the way. That book, everything is great about it. Thank you, whoever put it together. It was absolutely unbelievable. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me on this panel. My phone number, although my fault, I overlooked it, as according to Grace, I'm a D. You know, I was like perusing, this looks great, and I missed it. It's 416-908, not 905-908. I'd be more than glad to, you know, sit with you guys, do an F&A, converse, answer questions. No obligations or nothing. This is not, you know, twist your arm. If you call me, then you owe me something. You owe me nothing. All you owe me is I hope that whatever you choose to do, you go with inspiration, excitement, and filled with a heart of purity and doing great things for society. God bless you all. Love you. Thank you. Emma? Oh, guys, my bad. I didn't do the good thing. I'd like to introduce a lady that I heard speak the first time at a prayer meeting. Blew my mind. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And this lady, you know, she is a mountain. And when I mean a mountain, you're going to understand why. So give it up for the lovely Emma.
While we see the PowerPoint presentation. My name is Emma. And I ran my business. I sold my business actually last year, just literally a year ago, but I ran it for 22 years. So I know that Brian talked about in partnership, in sole proprietorship. I was the sole proprietor. And I only incorporated 2 years later when I made my first $60,000. And like Sebastian was just saying that you can start a business when part-time, still working, or just still working full-time and running a business. That was me. I was actually an interpreter for UHN. I don't know if anybody knows, it's in University Health Network, and I was an interpreter for them. I was also an interpreter for Immigration and Refugee Board, and I worked as an interpreter full-time. And like Brian, I'm going to date myself. Who remembers pagers? All right? I had a pager. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Pastor. So I had a pager. And at the hospital, I had my hospital pager here, and I had my business pager here. And that is how I started my business.